Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Under the Hood, where we talk about patterns that are created in childhood do impact us as grown-ups. And we have a grown-up child right here who we are so absolutely delighted to have. Garry Ridge is my guest today. And I'm going to read just a little bit about his bio, but he's going to tell you a lot more about himself. Okay, so he's the Chairman Emeritus of WD-40 Company, where he spent 25 years as the CEO building a culture of trust, belonging, and business success. Now known as the Culture Coach, he helps leaders worldwide create safe, inspired workplaces through their company, his company, The Learning Moment. A globally recognized executive coach and best-selling author, he has published his latest book, which we'll talk about in just a little bit, Any Dumbass Can Do It, which challenges leaders to build cultures of learning and belonging. And thank you so much, Garry, for being with us. This is a timely time to talk about kindness and good things, which is what we are spreading around the world, correct?
Yeah,
Yes.
g'day, Tina. It's just a delight to be with you today. Thanks for inviting me along for a little chat.
Absolutely. So I always start out with this question, and then I said we just go where it goes. But I've been interviewing great leaders, and I'm always looking at what's the underpinnings. How did you get to be where you are? It's not your typical business, although we bring in your business, but it's really how did you get to be where you are? And there's certain patterns that are created that sometimes help us a lot. Sometimes we have to look and redo. So tell us a little bit about your family of origin and kind of some of the underpinnings of who you are at this stage in your life.
Yeah, well, thank you. Yeah, if you, I haven't said many words, so people haven't picked it up yet, but I'm an Aussie. I grew up in Sydney, Australia. I'm the youngest of four in the family. There were 12 years difference between me and
Wow.
my next brother. Um, and I grew up in a little suburb of Sydney called Five Dock. I went to a local primary school. I went to high school. I was a paper boy, a milk uh, truck worker. I worked in a hardware store and a auto store. I did, so I did all the things you do back in, I guess 60s and 70s when I was a kid.
Hmm. Hmm.
But one of the things that was interesting is I grew up in a sort of an adult environment in some ways because of the distance between me and my next sibling. My dad was an engineer. He worked for the same company for 50 years, from when he was
Wow.
15 to when he was 65. He was born
Wow.
in 1907. And my mum lived till she was 99 years and 9 months old. She was
God
born in
bless.
1914, so she passed away a few years ago. But I had the reflection and the influence of my dad, who was a very organized, a man's word is a man's bond. Your shoes are
Hmm.
always clean, very a traditionalist, if you will. And on the other side, my mum was a bit of a rebel, and she was the one that would always tell me to get out there. And in fact, there's a chapter in my book titled "Even the Queen Sits Down to Pee," and it's about the lessons I learned from my mum.
Oh.
I left school and I went out in the workforce, and how I got where I am today, it's interesting. I think number one, I was curious. And number two, I wasn't afraid to disrupt myself. And there were many intentional disruptions, I guess, from moving from, one career path to another. But, a large one was, with a family 20, nearly 30 years ago, we picked up stumps and moved all the way across the world from Sydney,
Wow.
Australia to the US. So I think, the comfort with disruption has always
And the
been a part of
willingness.
me.
And
Yeah.
and 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 what you use the word comfort. What were some of the pieces behind the comfort? Because that's an interesting kind of word to use with that level of disruption. What
Well,
was behind it?
I think that I always felt that there was something wonderful on the other side of
Mhm.
disrupting myself.
Okay.
I'm a reasonably positive person. I think I always say that life's a gift. Don't send it back unwrapped. So I really do think that if you think about disruption of the other side being there's something over that hill. You've got to get over the hill,
Right.
but
Right.
it's exciting.
We just talked, we got to move houses. We were just
Yeah,
talking,
right.
if you want to get to the other side. Exactly. Right. Right. So that willingness, and also it's obviously a willingness to live with uncertainty.
Yeah. And it's interesting. I was at a conference in Boston a couple of weeks ago, and we were talking about uncertainty and the power of the word maybe.
Mhm.
And I thought that, I hadn't really thought about it this way, but a lot of people think of maybe as a negative. But really, I think great leaders are those that can find peace in uncertainty, because uncertainty is going to be around us forever. And saying the word maybe is kind of really saying, there's a couple of paths here, and I want to really think about which one, because the uncertainty is really the thing that if you get locked in uncertainty, I think you do
Yes.
nothing.
Right. Exactly. You get paralyzed,
Yeah,
correctly,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Right. And I think what people don't realize is that life is always uncertain, and it's a myth, especially in this day and age in terms of comfort and job stability and um, this uncertainty around every corner. So,
yeah. It's funny you should say that, Tina, because just a day or two ago, I was thinking about the world where it is today. And I was thinking about my mum and dad. And I thought, we think we got it bad? My mum and dad went through World War One, World War Two, the Great Depression. They didn't have the resources, information bases we have now, and we're griping about what things are like now. We have more opportunity to make a positive difference in the world
that's
now
true.
than we ever have. We talk about AI, and a lot of people, oh, AI is going to, steal jobs. Well, what about if we thought about AI as being an opportunity to repurpose time
I
instead
love
of
that.
taking, things away? Because one of the biggest pieces of negative feedback I got when I had the privilege to lead at WD-40 company was we don't have enough time. We don't have enough people. Well, I thought, wow, now if we could use this new technology to give us back time that we can either choose to spend on ourselves, maybe a
Right.
little more time sitting on the beach, or doing fun stuff instead of sitting in a computer and bashing out an Excel spreadsheet or trying to write 50 resumes or whatever.
So what you are saying, and I love to bring out these different pieces that I pick up, is that the way we look at something actually has a very big influence on the outcome, right? So it's that half full, half empty. If we're always looking for something that we can do to solve the problem, right? To create something new, to
You
look
froze.
beyond, correct? Or did we freeze? We froze. And we were talking about uncertainty.
We were.
And you were talking about the word maybe.
Yeah,
And
yeah. A lot of people
good.
think that word maybe is a negative, but really it's really a pause that allows you to think a little more about the uncertainty and which direction do I want to go.
Yes. And you were also mentioning that we actually don't have it quite so bad as our parents did, because my parents were kind of in the same generation as yours. And
Right.
the Great Depression, they just didn't hear about it in their face quite so quickly. I think that was
Yes.
probably the biggest difference, even though there was a lot of stress and death and all kinds of terrible things. We just, it's in our face, and it's in our face so quickly. And the opportunity, I think one of the things that I look a lot at, and maybe you can talk to this as well, is the separation, the tribalness, the be like me, and kind of pulling us apart. That I know that your brand of kindness is to do the opposite, is to bring people together. Um, why do you think it's taken such a hold? What's kind of just your take on it?
I think, well, firstly, I think you were correct, is that you cannot escape it. every minute of every day. Well, you can, that's a bad comment. You have to be intentional to escape the noise around us right now. You have to make intentional decisions to filter out the things that are really bombarding us. And I think, a lot of people have FOMO, the fear of missing out,
Right.
is really in play a lot. Um, so I think that um, you were right. When your parents and my parents were in an environment where this sort of terrible stuff was going on, they didn't hear about it within seconds. Not only that, they couldn't see it happening in front of them. There wasn't TV and internet and all this sort of
Right.
stuff. Um, so I think, that need for immediacy is probably another thing that's impacting things right now. Well, we have to get that right now. It's got to
Right.
be now. And I think that's something we need to think about.
Okay, so let me ask you, let's go back a little bit again. Because I love the foundation of the work that you do. And what were some of the behaviors that you noticed that you needed to shift and change? You came from
Personally,
yes, personally.
um, well, you know, my change in leadership and behavior happened basically when I went back to school back in 1999. I was already CEO of WD-40 Company. I'd become CEO in 1997. And um, I knew how, with the help of the people around me, to build the brand globally. But what was always on my mind was, how do we build an organization that reflected some of the reading that I'd done a little earlier? And I don't know if I told you the story, but I was on a Qantas 747. I was flying from Los Angeles to Sydney, 38,000 feet above the South Pacific Ocean, 2 a.m. in the morning, and I was reading. And I read a quote from the Dalai Lama, and it was, "Our purpose in life is to make people happy. If we can't make them happy, at least don't hurt them." And I thought, wouldn't that be wonderful if that was in an environment, in an organization? And then I wrote a quote from Aristotle, who was born in 384 BC, and it was, "Pleasure in the job puts perfection in the work." And I went, oh, duh. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we had an organization and organizations everywhere created an environment where people really enjoyed what they were doing? And we knew that that wasn't a fact, because the research showed us that 70% of people who went to work every day were disengaged or actively disengaged. So fast forward, enter Dr. Ken Blanchard into my life. I went back to school after hearing him speak at an event at the University of San Diego, and Ken actually became my professor for a while, and then one of my lifelong mentors.
Mm.
Um, I wrote a book with him eventually, and I was on his board for 10 years. But I went back to school, and I went through an awareness, and it's the awareness that I use in my coaching practice now. Is, I don't think most leaders get up every day and put up their hand and say, "I am going to be a soul-sucking CEO today." They don't really, and I invented this person, Alec, the soul-sucking CEO, so I could talk about those behaviors. But I had some of those behaviors. Was I a good enough listener? Did I micromanage too much? Did I want to add too much value? All of the things that were, not encouraging those around me to bring out the
Right.
best in themselves. So when I went back to school, I learnt that for 2 years. I went back to school whilst as CEO as a company, and I learnt the power of servant leadership, and I just started to put
What
it
what
to
kind of
work.
what kind of degree was it?
A master's degree.
In?
It was called a master's degree in executive leadership, but the
Okay.
basis of it was around learning servant leadership. And I'm not sure whether I ever shared this with you or not, but this is my little notebook that I carry around, and I have a little
Mm.
placard on there, and it says, "Am I being the person I want to be right now?" And then it says, "Who is that person?" And I ask, and that person is, I want to be grateful, caring, empathetic, reasonable, a listener. I want to be fact-based. I want to have a balanced opinion. I want to be curious. I want to be a learner, and I want to throw sunshine, not a shadow. And I've been
Beautiful.
carrying this little book around for years now, and it's by my side. It's not the same book, but when
Right,
I
right,
get a new
right.
book, I put a new placard on it. And I reflect on this. I actually have it on my computer in front of me as well to remind myself of who I want to be. Because my theory around this is we are just these basic human beings bumbling our way down this pathway of life. And
Absolutely.
in the bushes are these, what I call emotional thieves that run out and grab us. And they take us in the bushes. And these are thieves of, anger and greed and hate and impatience. And we get in the bushes and we feel, oh, this is okay. I don't, it's not too bad here. But if we stay in those bushes and don't get back on that bumbling path, we'll never, ever reach our true destiny. So I think a lot of it is awareness of who you want to be, getting comfortable that's who you want to be, and then being that
And then
person
doing
that,
it, right?
yeah, but not being ashamed of the fact that there's got to be reminders around you because the world will take us off our path.
Absolutely. So let me ask you this, Gary. This is a question that I think about a lot as well, coming from the emotional side. This, whatever you want to call these skills. I don't like the word soft skills because they're not soft. They're mandatory, difficult skills, and yet in so many companies, they're not seen as urgent. They're not seen as important. Um, the bottom line is what we, is kind of what's calling us. I have a colleague who goes into companies and she looks at, where we're spent losing money here and here and here. And I said, do you ever look at that emotional piece that pushes everything? She said, actually, no. So what's your kind of take on that? And how would you, I know that you're out there speaking and talking and teaching, and we'll talk about your book in a second. Um, what do you want to say to these leaders about this piece? What's your
Huh.
message on that?
Okay, I have a simple answer to that. It's the will of the people times strategy equals the optimal outcome. So, as leaders, as business people, we can write great strategic plans. I can write you a nice strategic plan. Got all the good elements. Who's the end consumer? Who's the end user? What's the path to market? What all the stuff's in it. We
Mm-hmm.
mark up that strategic plan. Take it to some smart professor. Hey, professor, what do you think about my strategic plan? Tina and Garry, good strategic plan. 70 out of 100. But if only 30% of your people go to work every day and are actively working towards that purpose, you're going to get 30% value out of your strategic plan. But if 80% of your people were going to work every day, actively, passionately working against your purpose, you're going to get 80% value out of your strategic plan. Unfortunately, not unfortunately, accurately, you hit the nail on the head.
Mm-hmm.
Leaders don't realize it's the will of the people times the strategy equals the outcome. And I am so convinced of that. I was having a conversation with a CEO the other day, and we were actually debating this. And he said, well, this culture stuff and people stuff, and, I can't measure the result. And I said, well, of course you can't measure the result because you've got a crappy culture. And I said, well, okay, let me put this to you. I want you next week to send everyone in your organization home for the week and tell them to do nothing. And he looked at me and I said, how much will you achieve in your organization next week? He said, zero. I said, so why are you allowing 70% of your people that are in work today to sit and quit? Because you have only a 30% engaged workforce. So those other 70% of the people are disengaged. And guess what? Some of them are actively disengaged. So they're working against you,
That's
not
right.
for you.
That's right.
They're working against you. They're toxic, poisonous, not intentionally, but they're poisoning
Right.
the well in the organization. And I said, the other thing I'll tell you is organizations with a low engagement, I will guarantee you, you have the highest cost of compensation because you're paying people to hate you. And they'll stay a long time if you
That's
pay them to hate you.
because you give them the golden handcuffs and they won't leave. That's right.
Yeah, but they're not going to be producing what you want.
Right. Right. Right.
Yeah.
So that's a wonderful way, and we'll sort of kind of broadcast that. It's a wonderful way to make it so that somebody can hear that ROI. Because if they don't, again, these soft skills, and we can't measure, and we can't do this, and we can't. But it's very clear, certainly clear to me as well, that if you don't engage in your people, they're the ones who. I mean, everything comes from us.
Yeah. But here's the
Everything.
warning. Here's the warning, warning, warning. You cannot sprinkle fairy dust on an organization and
Mm-hmm.
change the culture overnight. I have a friend of mine, Charlie Maloof. He owns a chain of Ashley furniture stores out
Mm-hmm.
in Charlotte. And he says, culture is not a microwavable event. It takes a crockpot approach. So the leaders who say, yes, culture is important, well, it's going to take you a little time to get that flywheel moving. Do you have an organization where people know and feel like they belong? Do you have an organization where people actually believe the work they do matters and makes a difference? What are you doing to create an organization where there's safety and trust and high psychological safety? And are your leaders being coaches, not trying to manage their people? Well, you've got to get those four things in place, and that's not a magic wand deal.
No, it's not a
It
magic
takes
wand.
time.
That's
So
right.
it's going to take time to get that thing. And I proved it. We proved it at WD-40. It took us a little
Right.
time to get the thing
Right.
moving. But once it got moving, my golly, it went beautifully.
Absolutely. So let me ask you another question, because I one of the things that I look at, and people ask me all the time in terms of tests, kind of personality tests, the Enneagram. I'm working on something called the GRI. Um, how valuable do you think they are in terms of helping the managers become coaches?
Well, I think it can help you identify some behaviors you have that are different to others. For example, when I first did my first disc, I was a turbo D. Be brief, be bright, be gone. And that wasn't going to work for me. But I'm glad I found out. And I had to intentionally change my
There we
behavior
go. That's it.
to be something different, particularly when I was working with someone else. At that
Mhm.
time, I was a turbo D. I had someone who was working with me, a senior executive. They were a turbo I. And a turbo I is late for a meeting because they're building relationships along the way. And the turbo D is saying, get in here, get to what.
That's right.
Now, what I realized is I couldn't change them. But if I wanted to bring the best out, I had to change me. So I had to do something intentional. Every time I went to meet with that person, I would take a cup of coffee with me. And I'd enter the room, into the office, and I'd sit there, and all that was going through my mind was, I don't have to get anything done here until I drink this coffee. So while I'm doing that, this person was just being the I they needed to be. And as I got to the bottom of the coffee cup, it was now I could move into let's move on. But, I had to intentionally, and if I do my disc profile now, I'm actually an ID, not a DI,
Hmm.
which took time. But, I think they're good, but you can't, bet everything on one of these psycho
No, you
tests.
can't. No.
You've got to sit with people, understand people, get to know people, spend time in the stinky locker room, as I call it, where you really get to, get alongside
Yeah.
people and understand them.
Yes. And so, again, you and I could talk for a long time because you have so much wisdom and so much experience. And I think everything that you say is unbelievably valuable and right up sort of my philosophical alley. Because you use so many terms, I had to become aware. I had to change me. I had to kind of self-reflect. And none of this can happen in an organization unless that leader takes that position. because
Yeah.
everything does come from the top,
Well,
right?
fish rot from the head, Tina.
Or my father used to say you lie down with dogs and you end up with fleas, so
Exactly.
we've got all
Yeah.
kinds of those good things, but you bring out the most important piece, I think, in terms of how we solve so many of the problems. If and as you said, this is not an overnight success story. This is a work in progress. It's always a work in progress. We're always growing and learning if we choose to do that. There's always another level. But I was talking to somebody earlier, and he said, if I do this work, does it become more automatic? Yes, it does. We are training and we are changing the neural pathways in the brain. And that's why it takes time, because that other part of us, wants to hold on forever. And no, 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 I've survived this long. So it's always a negotiation between me and me
Yeah.
before it becomes a negotiation between
So
me and
true.
you.
That's
Right.
that's why the reminders are good to change those neuro pathways, and you end up the behavior becomes more natural.
It does become more natural. So tell us just a little bit about your book and the title of your book. And I know it just kind of puts a icing on the cake of what we've been talking about.
Well, thank you. So, a lot of people, when they see the title, I go, what is this book? So, ASS in Australia does not mean someone's posterior or bottom. It means donkey. And the basis behind the book, really, or some of the basis behind the book, is thinking about the behaviors of a donkey. Now, donkeys sometimes get a bad rap. People think they're just stubborn or slow, but let me share the truth about donkey leadership for you. Donkeys are steady. They keep going long after others give up. They're loyal companions. You can count on them when the road gets rough. They are practical, not flashy. They know how to conserve energy and get the job done. And while you might not always think they rush into things, that caution often keeps them safe. So when I say any dumbass can do it, what I really mean is you don't have to be brilliant to be a great leader. You just need a bit of courage, a lot of care, and the humility to keep learning. Because, like the donkey, leadership is not about showing off, it's about carrying the load, sticking with the journey, and helping others get to where they need to go. So, there's
Beautiful.
the secret behind the cover.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. And so, where can they find the book and where can they get in touch with you?
Sure. My website is www.thelearningmoment.net. Follow me on LinkedIn, and the book is available on Amazon and at all good booksellers, as a good person would say.
Yes. And if you get a follow Garry, he sends you every day a little learning moment that is just a little treasure to start your day. So
Absolutely.
thank you, Garry. Thank you so much for being my guest. And I'm so delighted to have you here.
And Tina, thank you for what you do to amplify what's really important in the world. You're a
Thank you.
gift.
Thanks so much.